All right, so this is episode 351 of Cryptobiography, and this is my review of Dune, the movie, Dune Part 2 specifically, which I saw last night. This is actually the opening weekend of the movie. I wasn't really expecting to go, but my stepson, who's in the Navy, decided to kind of swing by for the weekend. So he's stationed one state away, essentially. And so it's a little bit of a thing for him to get here, but he just kind of showed up, which was fun, actually. And it was nice to see him. And last night we all went out. Well, my wife was working, but the two stepsons and I went out and saw Dune Part 2. And I guess this is going to be my review because I haven't gotten enough written for the story, and I've been thinking about the movie since. So, all right. So, first of all, Dune. So I read the book. I read the book actually around the time that the first Dune, Dune Part 1, I guess they would call it now, came out a couple of years ago. And because I knew it was going to be like a big thing socially, and I'm into the nerdy stuff in general. Didn't really think much of the book. Didn't really think much of the first movie either, and for a lot of the same reasons as this movie. So I don't see any real reason to rehash that too much, but you'll kind of get the idea, I think. I'm not usually very negative as a person. I especially don't like being negative when it comes to like nerdy stuff, because I know this is sort of the people I hang around with, and it's much easier to, have a spirited, fun conversation about something you like instead of, razzing on something you didn't enjoy. So, why didn't I enjoy Dune? Well, first of all, there are some very good things about Dune. Also, this is going to be the first part of this is going to be not so spoilery, but I guess I'm going to probably have to get into the weeds a little bit to sort of explain like why I didn't like what I didn't like, and so it's going to get a little spoilery. I don't know why. I guess there's a lot of people who just have not read Dune, and maybe they don't know the story. So if you need to not hear after a certain point, then please feel free to stop. That's fine. The first part should be pretty spoiler free because I'm going to stay sort of like broad for the first bit. But once we get into the weeds, I can't promise that I won't be spoilery. So there you go. All right. So there's some good things about the movie for sure. Definitely, if you are going to see it in IMAX. It absolutely rattles your seat at several points of the movie. The audio design is excellent. That was really good. The production design, scenes and so on, were really good. Effects were really good, and costuming was excellent. As well as makeup and makeup effects were good. So in all the technical stuff, like if it won a bunch of technical awards, like I would not be surprised, and I would actually, I would be perfectly happy with that. My problem is with it as a movie, and so what didn't I like about it? Well, first of all, it feels really kind of weird and kind of ugly. It's basically a white savior story. I mean, literally, a white guy comes to a planet of brown people, and not only because he literally becomes their messiah. It's like you hear about the trope of the white savior, but this is like super literal. He's actually a messiah character. I guess we're into the spoilers now, but you kind of knew about this from the first one if you saw the first one. Anyway, I guess we're on to spoiler alert at this stage at this point already. I don't really want to get too far into the weeds on that because, racial discussions are just not my forte. I'm just not very, deep into them. But even I, as, very ham-handed, person who's just kind of well-read but not much else when it comes to this sort of thing, can, see this trope coming and it's, it feels really weird. And really ugly, actually. And I guess there's something to be said about the fact that you have a whole authoritarian planet of what is essentially albinos, and the more albino you are, the higher you up in the chain. So I guess there's something to be said there. But then you have the white guy who has to come to a desert planet full of desert people, and only he can be their messiah. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, enough said about that. Most of my problems with the story have to come with the way that the story is handled, like the plot, sort of setup and payoff. All those sort of basic story things are all really, really bad in this movie. They're really poorly handled and they're really badly done. The acting, I don't want to say anything about the acting one way or the other because I don't think they were given anything to act to. There's really not any thing to act to in this. There's like words to say, and that's it. Like there's no acting to be done in this movie. It is really, really poorly designed for acting purposes. So I don't want to say anything about the acting. The actors tend to be people I have admired in other things, and I'm sure they could be good in a different script. But there's really not much for them to act to in this movie. So what happens in this movie that I didn't like is essentially everything is set up and paid off in a really, really ham-handed, amateurish, and uninteresting ways. So, first of all, anything that has to do with the whole prophecy sort of angle of it, because like there's a whole bunch of like it is written prophecy stuff. All the prophecy stuff, sort of like some of it even happens after. Like some of it's after, like things happen and then they claim, oh, as it was written. Really? Like you can't let the audience know? Like you can't set this up at all? A lot of other times, like it'll set things up, but it'll be inside the same scene. Like it's literally setting something up just so that it can claim that to have set it up, basically. Really feels ham-handed and really feels ugly. It's so dopey, and it really is ridiculous. Actually, the entire movie house actually laughed at the movie, not with the movie, but at the movie, when they basically made an accidental Life of Brian reference. Basically, one of the people says about the white savior character, he declares that he isn't the Messiah, so he must be the Messiah. Like everyone immediately laughed. Like everyone who had seen Life of Brian ever in their lives laughed at that ridiculous bit of dialogue. So, and then there's so many things, and it's so first of all, anytime there's anything to do, and this is like half this so-called storyline is like all this prophecy crap that gets sort of like ham-handedly sort of semi brought up like 1 minute before it quote unquote pays off, and so it doesn't there's no time to feel like anything's really being set up. It's just like, oh, here's the next thing that they're going to claim as part of the prophecy. But there's never a part early in the movie where like, oh, there's a whole clever little thing about setting up where everything will be sort of like connected. Even the one time there they kind of tried to, it really didn't pay off very well at all, because like it was really ridiculous how it worked. Like, oh, her name means desert spring. Okay, great. So, and she doesn't like that name. Okay, that's fine. That actually didn't help the story one way or the other, but she was really mad about her original name apparently, or her her local name or whatever they called it. And then eventually like she's supposed to like take the same poison and add like one drop of that poison to one of her tears, and then sort of magically that sort of makes the poison go away, and there's not really any reason why that would work. I guess we're supposed to assume that because her name was Desert Spring, and that in that scene they finally claim, oh, that the Desert Spring is going to be the reason that the poison goes away, essentially. And so I guess we're supposed to realize, oh, she's realizing that she is the Desert Spring and therefore she can clean the poison. But that doesn't make any sense. Like, it makes zero sense. It's really ridiculous, really bad. Yeah, I don't know why they were thinking about that. That is really, really stupid. There's also like one other thing I would like to, and I don't know if they give like Oscars about this, but maybe some other awards get given for this. And some of the fight choreography was kind of fun, especially like the one-on-one knife fighting. There's like, although I have a complaint about that too later on, but like the one-on-one knife fighting choreography is very good. Like it's very fast, like actual knife fighting is. It's very dangerous. Now in real life, what happens in a real knife fight is people get cut like a lot. And but who wins is like who does like the really bad cuts. Like, you know, like you're gonna get cut in turn, but you know, you get the guy way worse than he gets you, and you end up okay. Now, in a movie, they can't really do that, and I get that. So it's really, you know, they you can pretend that the suits that they're wearing are protecting most of them from most of the cuts or whatever. And you know, but whatever. But the knife fight choreography feels very fast and very accurate. And I don't understand. Okay, so like they have like the desert people who have knives, but then they also have anti-tank weapons, but they don't have any guns. Like, and we're and they don't treat the anti-tank weapons as though it's like a special thing. They act as though they have like a bunch of like reloads of it, and like they could use a lot more. And there's a lot of fighting that sort of indicates that they're winning, and they have these laser things that cut apart the enemy as well. So it's like, but then they usually use knives. It's like, why are you using knives? Which is weird enough on its own. So that, okay, so it got super far flung, whatever, and they're using knives like a lot, like way more than you would. Like, yes, in combat, yes, if you get right on top of someone, then you need to pull out a knife instead of a gun, because a gun's going to be sort of easily swept away, whereas, you know, knives are harder to do that to. But, yeah, and then, but even more so, the high-tech enemy who's coming in, you know, to farm the spice, their ships have lots of guns. None of the people on the ground have guns. It's like, why are these people like with clearly high, you know, strong weapons? Why are they not using guns? Where are the guns in this situation? Like, they tear apart whole mountainsides with like these, you know, these cannons, and then but every time like there's a person on the ground, they just have a knife. It's so dumb. It really feels weird. It's a weird choice, and I'm sure it goes. The problem is, even though I did in fact, like I said, well, I listened to the audio version of Dune, the whole thing, and I was on a road trip with my wife, so it's like we listened to it together, and we had basically the same, like, came to the same conclusions. Like, it has some of the same issues, but also because it's such a mess, like Dune, the book, is such a mess, like it's hard to remember details from the book. Like maybe they're in the book, there's some reason why they can't use guns, but it sure doesn't feel like it in the movie, and I don't think there is a reason ever given. It's just a weird sort of cultural thing, maybe, which is one thing, but they're using guns from like all the flying vehicles, like the floating ones, the little flivvers, all that sort of stuff. They all have guns, but they can't give a gun to like their soldiery, which is ridiculous. Like, no way. Yeah. So, and there's one other sort of, and then, so there's, okay, so we've gotten several issues, and one of the other issues in the movie is that, like, it's a really long movie, and it's supposed to be like one of these world building movies, and I guess people who like world building like Dune, but yeah, unless you are only into world building and not into anything about story, like, do not see this movie, because it is very frustrating. So there's like all these different factions, and we get some time with all of them, and then none of them meet each other, like, ever at all. Like, it happens like once or twice a little bit, just because of this or that, but basically everyone's sort of on their separate planets until the end of the movie. And then like the Emperor comes to Dune, like there's no reason for him to do it other than to become vulnerable. Like, it was pretty clear they didn't give a reason. He just sort of comes, like, you know, they didn't set him up as being particularly boastful or, you know, sure of his own, you know, security or whatever. That doesn't happen. It's Christopher Walken looking like an 80-year-old, which, you know, is probably about what he is. And but they don't set up that he's like particularly braggadocious or cocksure or certain of his own immortality or whatever. He just sort of like comes, and I guess so now he's vulnerable. And the other the albino authoritarian guys come, and so now they're vulnerable. And so basically all the bad guys are in one place so they can get like killed, and then the whole galaxy can be switched over to something else. I guess that's that's their idea of story building, of storytelling. So yeah, it doesn't make sense at all. And what I really love, though, it actually almost made me like scream at. I really had to hold myself back. So right at the end of the story, one of the characters says to one of the other characters, "You've chosen the wrong sides." And the character who says it back is like this really powerful, wise, figure, maternal figure. And she says, "Oh no, there are no sides." And she isn't like gainsaid or like disputed in any way. That's just sort of how the scene ends, and as though we're supposed to agree with that. Meanwhile, like, there's been nothing but sides in this movie, and none of them have met each other, and like there's no interaction until like the final fight, so that one side can win, and there can be an overturning. It's like, really, is this what your character is going to try to claim at this point? There's no sides when it's like a story about sides, or maybe not. Like maybe they really were that like unconscious of like how badly their story was coming across. Like maybe they thought things were like coming across as like, oh, everything's connecting and stuff. It was not connecting. It does not connect. Everyone's sort of separate until they need to not be. Things are set up, and here's another example of something being set up and then paying off very, very badly. So first of all, there is a Chekhov's gun in the form of nuclear weapons. So, and then, whoa, but hey, you say, that's a setup and payoff, because that's the whole thing about Chekhov's gun. You show a gun early on, and then later on it has to go off, and that's Chekhov's gun. Well, first of all, Chekhov's gun is also like a cliche. Like, that's why Chekhov's gun is like, yes, it should work, and that's kind of how storytelling should work in general. But if you just do that, then it's very obvious, and it's really kind of lame. And that's what happens here. Like, they mention nukes, so nukes have to go off at some point. Like, it's literally a Chekhov's gun in the form of a nuke. But I don't even have that much of a problem with that part, because, like, I get that. Like, okay, so there's sort of an important story beat that you're setting up, and so it has to pay off at some point. And that's fine. That's how things should work. But these nukes are never referenced until this one guy comes down, and it's Thanos. And so Thanos, the actor who plays Thanos, and so Thanos somehow he's like an enemy. Like the white savior and his desert buddies are attacking the guy and his buddies, and they should kill him. Like there's no way they shouldn't kill him, but somehow he recognizes his steps. Like, what? How is that possible? Like, when you're in the middle of a fight, but also the guy's wearing like a huge suit. Like, what the hell does that mean? Because he knew this guy from like before, apparently, like, before Dune. So how do you recognize his steps inside a Dune like desert suit, like this heavy techno suit that he has to wear in order to kind of survive? It's like, okay, so whatever. Anyway, he doesn't kill him, and he lets the guy join him because they're old friends or whatever. And then this one guy happens to be the one guy who knows about the nukes, knows where they are, can bring him to them. And so then the white savior can put his little fingers in the little reader. And then, of course, because, he's the white savior, it opens up the nukes. That's exactly how the nukes get set up and paid off. Like, literally, the guy comes, there's no mention of nukes or any, like, how are we going to ever, stop this war? I mean, I guess there's sort of that feeling, but, it's never really kind of set up properly. And then the guy's just like, oh, yeah, and I can show you exactly where the nukes are. And the nukes aren't even in a clever place. They're just like, why weren't these ever found before? They even say it in the movie, like, why weren't these ever found before? Oh, they were hidden in plain sight. Yeah, hidden in plain sight. Okay, great. Yeah, we got desert people doing nothing but wandering around all day looking at things. And they're not going to, notice that this one cave has like this little techno area where you can put in your fingers, and there's like some light. It's actually lit up and shit. It's like, okay, yeah, no one's going to notice this shit. it doesn't. I guess at this point, I shouldn't even complain about the fact that these are nukes, but they were the great grandfather's nukes, so they've been there like 100 years or something like it. Maybe 50 years at minimum, and like no one's actually opened them or been maintaining them because like no one knew they were there, and they certainly weren't being like maintained or anything. And yeah, and yet they work perfectly. Like, okay, yeah, that's how things work in real life, anyway. So yeah, so you have like this, basically like nothing gets set up and paid off properly. And even when they try to set up and pay off things, it doesn't work. So there's a romance arc, and at the time it kind of, it was like, it's like, oh, okay, so I guess they're kind of falling in love, but then nothing really happens with it. Like they sort of like still set apart from each other, and they kind of claim they like each other, but like there's no actual indication of that other than the words, which is, like the worst way to show something, because they're telling, not showing. And it really doesn't feel like there's any like actual connection between them at all. And then which they're trying to set up, and then at the end of the movie, so that when he turns her down to do sort of like to take the Empress's, or the future Empress's hand in marriage and drop this other girl, it's supposed to feel like a big weighty issue. But of course it doesn't, because it's like it almost feels like the opposite. Like when it happens, it's like, oh, that's the only reason they had like a kissing scene earlier. And then the one or two times where they claim they love each other, even though like who could tell. The only reason is so that they could try to set up a payoff in this like almost final scene. Okay, great. So that's why that's why they were doing that. Not because it was like actually good storytelling, but just because they were desperately trying to set up something so that there would be a bit of a payoff on the final scene. Another thing that didn't work in the final scene was it was really confusing, like how the knife fight worked. Like I liked the actual choreography, but then there's like this whole story beat where he gets stabbed and he gets stabbed again, but then he's not stabbed and instead he's stabbing the other guy. I actually had to ask the other people who like were more fans of Dune and would actually know more about the story, like because he had been given some sort of weird psychic powers which are never really explained. So it was like that part of his psychic powers, like he actually wasn't injured, and then so that brought the guy near him, but then he wasn't injured, so he could stab him, and he surprised him. And apparently not. Like apparently like his powers are only when he's doing that yelling thing that reverberates and kind of forces people to do their bidding. Apparently no, he just like was like bringing the attention up to the knife that was up high so that he could take the knife out from his belly and stick it in the other guy. Yeah, that did not come across. It felt really weird and really awkward, and it was really, really dumb. And then of course the guy, Knifey Albino. Knifey Albino has to say, you fought well, like as he was dying. Like, no, that was not really paid off very well. That was really weird and awkward and bumpy. Like the actual fight choreography when they were like fighting looked really cool and like it was fun. And I understand you can't really do like quick fight choreography for a main fight. Like for against like peons, you can like do quickie knife fights, and like as long as they win, like who cares, right? But for a story beat fight, you can't just do knifey. Oh, and then someone just stabs each other. Like that doesn't feel good for a story, and even they don't even fall for that in this one. But the one that they do choose, like I said, it's like I can't tell what the hell's going on with that. So anyway, yeah, I actually had to ask, like, was that part of his like psychic powers? Was he like mind controlling him to think that he wasn't injured? No, apparently he was actually injured, and he yeah. So it's like, okay, so I guess he wasn't injured. He wasn't injured that badly. I mean, the knife was way down on the side of his body, but where it went in, like it would have hit a major organ or two. So I guess he got lucky. Who knows? All right. So anyway, Dune. If you're gonna see it, expect spectacle. Like it's a very pretty movie. The warm writing didn't come across very well to me. Like for the most part, because like up close, it just looks like you're riding a big pile of cardboard. And from the distance, it just looks like a little tiny doll figure on the back of, a bunch of wiggles in the desert. Like, it's not really all that great. The part of the worms that I really liked was like when they were coming at the camera, like at quote unquote at you, like, whether they're attacking the people or like threatening one of the characters or whatever. Really, that then they felt very weighty and very large, but the worm riding part unfortunately did not feel very good. So in summation, it's mostly a problem with story. I can't separate from the direction because the director is also one of the two screenwriters, so I'm not sure how much of this is just the director being close to his own work and then not really seeing the issues or whatever, or not being able to improve it off the page because he wrote it along with one other person. It's also like it's kind of an indictment of the original story Dune, which is a mess and has a lot of these sort of same things, which it's not really a story. It's basically just a big exercise in world building. If you don't care about that, if you're like, okay, I'm just in for almost 3 hours of just world building and spectacle, go see it. If you actually are interested in like acting and storytelling and like proper setup and payoff, please don't see it. And I think that's enough. So thank you for listening. If you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, cryptobiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, or Mastodon. And thanks again for listening. Words of Music, copyright 2024. Brandon Starr, all rights reserved. Characters and events, well, are fictionalized or satirical, but that doesn't really matter in this case. Have a good one.